What is that clear fluid dripping off the end of the swan's beak? A woman standing next to me on the bike path a few days ago asked me this question. I was busy trying to figure out how to focus my camera, so I offered an unthoughtful answer by saying it must be pond water since the swans are always foraging for food by dipping their beaks into the pond. I'm embarrassed to admit that this is a typical example of how unobservant I am. I'd noticed the dripping from the end of the beak before, but never considered it relevant. The next day, while reading a book I have about swans by Malcolm Schule, I came across a passage about salt glands. Swans and other seabirds have a specialized gland that works sort of like a kidney by filtering the blood to remove excess salt from the seawater they drink. In the case of swans, the salt gland is located inside the skull just above the eyes, and the highly concentrated saltwater waste it produces is excreted through the nostrils, where it runs down the beak and drips off the end. The swans frequently shake their heads vigorously, and this is, at least in part, an effort to clear the salty wastewater from their nostrils. The persistent drip at the end of a swan's beak that I ignored turns out to be an important symptom, giving insight into swan biology that answers a question I should have been asking. How is it possible for swans to drink salt water without dying? One evening, while watching Marie execute another graceful exit from the nest, I started wondering why sometimes when she leaves, she covers the eggs and sometimes she doesn't. Is she just being lazy on some days? I don't know the answer, but another section in the book I mentioned talks about how the cygnets, while still inside the egg, can make whistling sounds that may be used to communicate with their siblings and coordinate hatching, and may also be a means of telling the mother if they're too cold or too hot. The suggestion that cygnets talk to their mother from inside the egg seemed a bit speculative to me. But I was perplexed by Marie's inconsistent behavior regarding covering or not covering the eggs when she left. I began to do some wild speculating myself. Do you think that when Marie leaves the eggs uncovered, it's because the cygnets have tweeted to her that they're too hot? Wouldn't that be fascinating? When will the eggs hatch, and have there been more eggs in the past? Rumors are all over the place on these questions. Lindsay, a woman I met a few days ago, saw more than 3 eggs in the nest back in May, but could not get an accurate count because she could never get a clear view that showed all the eggs. But she also mentioned that many other people have told her they counted as many as 8 eggs in the nest. There's only 3 eggs now, so what happened to the others? Predators could have stolen them, or they could have been washed out by a high tide. It's not uncommon for swans to lose some or all of their eggs to these sorts of catastrophes. Malcolm Schule writes that when swans lose all of their eggs, they will often build a new nest and lay a new clutch of eggs. Our swans appear to have had exactly this experience this year. A woman stopping by the nest on Monday told me that the swans were originally nesting on the opposite side of the pond, a story which I've heard from many other people, but this woman added that the swans had a clutch of eggs that were washed away with the high tide, and that is when they moved to their new nest and started over. I met Christina at the nest, and she had a photograph on her smartphone from the 1st of June, showing the nest with just 1 egg in it. It could be that the other 2 were covered, or that they had fallen out of the nest and somehow got back in later. But if there was only 1 egg then, the other 2 were probably laid within a few days after the first one seen in her photograph. This would mean that the eggs are due to hatch somewhere in the middle of July. This is the story that so many of us swan watchers want to believe. The eggs are going to hatch. It's human nature to be quick to embrace any story that confirms what we want to be true.